Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the US Analytics Summer Webinar Series. This is our third week, and we are going to talk about migrating to OCI. This call will be specific to Oracle EPM. And so if you are on-premise and you're migrating to OCI from maybe your own servers, that's not what this call is for, but we can definitely help you out if you have questions on that. But this call will specifically be for Oracle EPM Gen 1 for those clients that have probably gotten messages about moving to OCI. My name is Jennifer Conard. I lead the support service team at US Analytics, and the primary resource that will be leading, she's our planning lead, Melinda. She will give a background of herself, and then Don is also joining me. He's on our team, and he may chime in from time to time. So I have been in the Oracle space for over 25 years or so, so I have a long background in Oracle EPM. I have found support to be my the area that I have most interest in, and we built quite a stellar, dedicated team supporting clients. And so that's a little bit about myself. Melinda, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name's Melinda McHugh. I've been with US Analytics for about 6 years. Prior to that, I was in consulting with another firm. And prior to that, I did, for about 10 years, financial planning and analysis at the corporate level. So I did corporate budgets and forecasts, which very much prepared me for this role, as that's mostly the audience that we work with. I've been in roles from end user, administrator, crossover roles as analyst and administrator. And then I hopped over to the consulting world and really found my passion in support. And so we have a great team here at US Analytics, and I do what I love because it's a blend of the best parts of all the jobs I've ever had.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Melinda.
Uh-huh.
And you do a great job, and you're going to do an awesome job on this presentation. And then Don, you just want to say hi real quick?
Hi, real quick. This is Don. So it's a guy in the background. I've been in consulting with US Analytics for a little over 2 years now, but been in the Oracle space since 1998. So working with Hyperion Enterprise, mostly in financial close and the processes around that, but just always trying to keep up with what Oracle's doing. So yeah,
lots of changes. And so yeah, this summer has been pretty interesting getting everyone migrated. So all right, so I'll get started. So the cloud moving to OCI. This webinar really reviews the key points for clients that are in wave 6 or later of the OCI migration. So I would say, we may be late to the game a little bit because obviously there's been multiple waves that have gone before us. And so part of our discussion points will be things that we've learned helping clients. So as you know, earlier this year, Oracle was moving people that are on Gen 1 over to the Gen 2 cloud environments. And essentially, if you are familiar with like old on-prem days, effectively, it's like they're basically putting everything on a new server, essentially. So, or maybe even changing it around in the data center, basically. But that in a nutshell is what migration to OCI Gen 2 is, as well as a few new features, and we'll cover that. So again, I said this at the top right before we got started, that this call is specifically for Oracle EPM Cloud customers. And in fact, if you've already been part of wave 1 through 5, this may be irrelevant, although you might find some useful tips that we'll talk about. So wave 6 is going on right now. So if you were part of wave 6, your test pod got migrated on August 4th, and your production pod will be this coming Friday on the 18th. Real quick, this is an example of an email that you might have gotten. So we took one of our clients' emails, obviously blurred out just for confidentiality, but this is what the email would have looked like. And if you didn't get this, then you are probably not in an account administrator or a service administrator for your company. So if you didn't get this and not sure, probably someone at your company would have gotten this email. So if you don't know who got it or are not sure who even these individuals are for your account, it'd be wise to reach out to Oracle. Just open an SR, contact the Oracle line, and they can help you to let you know who would have gotten this email. I will say there are so many emails that come from Oracle Cloud, when they're doing maintenances or when they're doing scheduled routines. So you would have had to pay attention, and obviously the subject line was important. Please, important, please read, your EPM cloud environment will be migrated. So these are, and then I will say at the beginning of the year, Oracle did send a note or an email and said, your migrations can either be customer or client-led migrations or Oracle migrations. So you would have had the chance to do this on your own, likely with your IT organization, with the security folks. And so if you didn't, now they're doing the waves of migrations. And so, like I said, we're right in the middle of wave 6, and wave 7 will be upcoming next month. So that is a little bit about just real high-level disclaimer. Again, everything that we're going to share with you is basically feedback that we've gotten from clients or where we've researched the Oracle website, Cloud Customer Connect. They have lots of information there to help you, through this process. And then, of course, this is kind of what we do also as part of our support offering. So With that, I will hand off to Melinda and we'll get started on, we have basically 4 main topics that we'll cover. At the end, we'll have some final thoughts and we will leave some time for Q&A if you have questions. So, or you can always put a note in the chat. Catherine is our moderator and so she'll be watching the chat too. So, all right, Melinda, here you go. You're talking about security.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. So we're starting with security because with this migration, the biggest change or enhancement rather is the security. And when you're moving from Gen 1 to Gen 2, pretty much everything else moves seamlessly, but you end up with a much more beefed up security area. And if you're familiar with like my services within Gen 1 and you set up SSO with a single sign-on, all of those configurations are within one screen. And they're kind of numbered out. Within the Gen 2, there's multiple screens and there's multiple places to add configurations. One of the things to keep in mind is that every single company, every company has their own security protocols. There's not a one size fits all. Some of the feedback that we've gotten from customers that have done this, one of the biggest things is that the EPM team and or your EPM support provider, if you have one, should work very closely with the IT security team. And I say that because with the new configurations that are available in Gen 2, the first thing that happens is you add or configure your identity provider. So like you might have, and every company is different. You might have Okta, you might be authenticating through Azure, maybe Active Directory, but that has to be set up first. And in my experience thus far with the clients that have either done client-led migration, or have already started this process, maybe they were in wave 5 or 6, this piece was done by their internal IT security teams. They set it up and then they reached out to us and said, okay, we've done this part, now what? And the next part is you set your IDP policies. And so really what that is, it's just saying, okay, what method am I going to allow for people to log in? And you may end up with, oh, I want them to log in via Okta only, or I want to give my administrators the ability to log in via Okta or natively. I do recommend having maybe just one or two, maybe your service account that is still able to log in natively, which still gives them the ability to run EPM automate commands. Because if with the 2-pass authentication or multi-factor authentication, you do lose that ability. So you'll have to have probably a couple people that can log in natively still.
And you've done these 3 groups, right?
Yes. And so, yeah, that's a good point, Jennifer. So for one of our clients, we created an Okta group and what we called like a password allowed group, and split the users up accordingly. And while we won't go through all of the configurations today, because I'll let you know there's a bunch. That was one of the other feedback that we got from clients. They said, gosh, there's so much in here to choose from. And several of these clients are long time IT security people that's what they do. And like there's so many different configurations that we kind of had to do trial and error to figure out, okay, what combination works to give us the expected results. Order is important. And that's also the combination of the configurations. It's not just the IDP policy configuration. You also have a sign-on policy after that you have to set up. And so then that's like the next step, almost the next layer of security. So you got your IDP that says, okay, how can they log in? And then you have your groups that are configured to one or the other, or maybe both, depending on what the needs of the company are. Then your sign-on policy, it kind of goes into like a order process, and it'll hit that and say, okay, well, I passed IDP. Now I can show the screen that either they can log in with Okta or they could log in with just their username and password, or it can give you the option on both. So that's been interesting to see how people set that up. And again, it goes much more smoothly when you have the EPM team and the IT team working together to have like working sessions. That's kind of what we've done with some of our clients. And it's been really helpful because the IT people are really educated on that side of the house, and the EPM resources are educated on that side of the house. When they log in, they say, no, I can't get in. And most of the time your IT team didn't have logins to EPM to begin with.
Yeah, and one of the other things that you noticed, or at one of our clients, that they use Oracle Fusion or Oracle EBS, that this same domain or identity manager, if you will, it kind of covers everything, right? So it allows you to set up security for your Oracle GL, as well as if you had the capital management, and then now EPM is part of that. And so it's confusing to the EPM team, but probably like Melinda mentioned, the IT security folks, this is probably something they've already seen, and working together really nets the best result.
Yes, absolutely. it's great to have that collaborative effort.
And then did you talk about the where you can set up basically like an icon or a setup page so you can access multiple environments? So you might have your EPM test and your EPM prod. Is that set up in security as well?
Yes, actually, there's a tab or like a menu called applications, and what it allows is that you can create a link using an icon to say, let's say your prod environment, your test environment. You could set it up to the Fusion environment, and it would be a landing page, so to speak, to where all of these different icons that just have in the configuration when it's set up, they activate a link that's kind of sitting underneath it. And there's other kind of out of the box options to choose from. Thus far, I haven't had any clients that have wanted to add more content on that landing page, but that doesn't mean that that wouldn't be something that would suit your needs. And that was kind of that one. Setting that up was a little bit interesting as well, because what was happening early on is the client says, well, when I go to my apps, there's nothing there. And it took a little bit of again, a little bit of trial and error working with the client to figure out exactly which screen or which menu we needed to configure those pieces to get it to show up exactly how they wanted it. So that was good. And I
Yeah.
think, Jennifer, missed anything else on security?
No,
The
just
biggest,
just knowing that it's the biggest time part of the entire migration. It seems like getting the security right is the most time intensive part and needs to be, you definitely need to plan the time for that.
Melinda, it's
yeah,
Don. Just one comment
yeah,
I want to
Don.
throw. Yeah, I just want to throw in one comment I've seen is on the IP allow list. If companies use that, it used to be like a separate menu in the My Services now. Whereas the new stuff, you got to use EPM Automate to add the IP allow list, and that's just for companies that allow certain IP computers to come in. You provide the IP number, and that can allow that entry. But that's a little bit of a change from what used to be a menu and you add it, but now you use the EPM Automate tool to add it. It's a minor thing, but some companies may run into it.
Yeah. So basically, just to recap, everything in security that's related to either single sign-on or multi-factor authentication, or even the order, setting up the groups that in your policies, all of that is done through this new identity access manager. And we have some links at the end of this presentation, so everyone will get a copy. Or I guess you can access this, but there'll be links to the Oracle information if you don't already have that. So, all right. Well, if there's nothing else on security, then I will move on to the data source integration. All right. Data source integration, Melinda.
Yep. So really, this should be seamless. From what we've seen, we haven't had any issues with data source integration. The only thing that I would keep in mind is if it was client led and your URL changed, then you would need to check all of if you had any automations or anything like that were calling using EPM automate commands to call the old URL within the classic environment. That would need to be checked, and that we'll talk a little bit more about testing in our next section. But for the most part, especially for the Oracle led migrations, what they're doing is, and to me this was a little bit confusing, just how my brain works. So hopefully it'll clear up if there's questions about that for any of you on the call. But you have your current URLs right now, and during your kind of like your testing period, you'll have a new URL. But once the migration goes through, the old URL will automatically be redirected to point to the new environments. So with the Oracle-led migrations, those URLs aren't going to be changing. They will configure they being Oracle, configure something on the back end that makes it seamless. So you're not having to tell all your users, oh, go update your URLs. And I know we had one client that when they read this, they misunderstood, and so did I, to be quite honest, because I had another client that they did their own migrations and they had completely separate URLs. So it was a little bit different. And when the migration is completed, anything you have pointing to the old URL should still work. Now, that being said, of course, with any upgrades, any updates, migrations, you always want to make sure to test it all. I don't think that, my understanding is, like, if you have any REST APIs, those won't be changing either, that they should still point to where in the new environment, they should point to there once Oracle does the full migration. Now, that kind of brings us into a little bit more of the testing. Jennifer, if you can, unless Jennifer, you, Don, have anything to add about the data source?
Nope, I don't.
Okay.
All right,
I thought
I'll
that'd
move
be a
along.
good
Good
segue
segue.
into regression testing. And what we mean by regression testing is you'll have from the time that Oracle releases your new environment, you'll get an email and it'll say, hey, your environment's ready, and you can set that up and you go in and you create it. And then for those about 2 months, you will have different URLs. And So you'll have your Gen 1s, which is your current live prod and test environments, and you'd have your Gen 2, which would be your temporary testing for prod and test. And that's where we recommend doing a lot of your testing. If you're wondering, like, well, what exactly should I test? And, definitely your critical processes. Any of your integrations going back and forth, just make sure they still work. And, can your database refresh? What about, metadata updates, your forms or your reports? Does everything render as you expect it to? Maybe do like a light, like I wouldn't say full out end to end, but a light, like maybe budget process, well, not budget, but a forecasting process or a month end close testing, just on the main things that, the more critical tasks that happen during those cycles.
And I think
Also,
I would think this you would follow also, or you would just follow the same things that you do on your monthly Oracle update patch testing, or Oracle updates that people receive, on the monthly or quarterly basis, whatever they do. Is that kind of that same list of testing?
yes,
Because essentially that's what it is. I mean, you're not testing a patch. You're basically testing that you've got moved over to a different data center.
yes, and just functionality. Does it still work? And really this, everything should work, because again, the biggest change here is security. It's just your classic cloud security on crack, basically, because there's so many different options. But with, back to the regression testing part of that, we highly recommend that you back up your environments and download them somewhere. So, most of the time, like even if you do like an artifact snapshot or backup manually, it's in that folder, in your snapshots folder. But just to make sure, like I'm a very cautious person. So my clients will tell you, like, I back up my backups half the time, but because when you don't need it, you have it. But if you really need it, you don't have it. That's the one time you get burned. And you just don't want that to happen. So we'd recommend just saving off a point in time backup, like right before the migration happens from your current environments. That way you have all your artifacts, everything you need. Same thing with tests. If you had something in development and you're maybe in your test environment, make sure you back that up so you can import them back in if you need to. Because once they do that migration, if something gets dropped off, you're not going to have access to that old environment anymore. It'll be all redirected to the new environment.
Hey, Melinda, I have a question.
Yeah,
This is going back towards, I think, a slide you covered a minute ago, but someone was asking in the chat, how are companies using the groups? And do you have to use groups?
that's a good question. So what we've seen so far is they're using it more to dictate who has to use like if you have multi-factor authentication, forcing some of the users to go that direction as opposed to log in natively. No, but to answer the second question, you don't have to use the groups. If you want all of your users to log in the exact same way, then you don't have to set the groups up at all. Actually, the particular client I'm thinking of, in the original configuration they had for their security, they had everybody logging in the same way. And we just recently added kind of another enhancement for them to add the group piece in. So it's still like they were still able to log in. But that's a good question.
Okay. And then Paul Trong is saying you can create the groups and then assign the groups to the applications later when you add new users, just add user to appropriate groups.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is good to use the groups. Even going back to like on-prem days, you didn't want to like to create security protocols directly to users because the maintenance is a nightmare. It ends up being too much. And it's the same concept here, where it's easier when you add users in to add them to however you want their security to function, as opposed to setting it directly to a user.
Okay. Thank you.
Jennifer, I think I'm. Oh, I guess the other thing that we'd want to test, I remember on my little slide, I hadn't mentioned verbally yet, but just can you submit and pull data back? Just kind of your regular activities that you would do.
Yeah, and test. I know you're a big proponent of that. Test. Okay. All right. So now we will talk about the new features of going to OCI Gen 2. And there you go.
Some of these are pretty cool. One of the things I think is the coolest is, or the most beneficial, is that you have available to you up to 60 days of backups. And in your current like classic cloud environments on your Gen 1, you have to save those off on your own. And with this, and this is only available for those customers that are on the Gen 2 OCI platforms. With EPM Automate, you can run a command, and it's I think I have it listed here, EPM Automate list backups, and it will give you a list of all the backups that are saved off in a repository that Oracle is saving for you. And from that, you can then you just need to copy the naming convention and download that specific backup so it lands in your snapshot area, or it downloads and then you upload it into your snapshot area. And if you need to restore the whole thing, you could go through the process of restoring the whole snapshot. Or if you just needed a few artifacts, maybe you were doing testing in test and a colleague didn't realize it and they were like, oh, I need to migrate prod to test something else, and they overwrote some development you did in test with a copy of production, well, then you can go back a few days and say, okay, well, I'm going to grab these particular things, like maybe these reports or forms or whatever you had in development from that snapshot. So I think that is great, because especially if, while we highly recommend clients save these snapshots off to a server, some still aren't doing it, and we have had instances where we've had some oopses, and it was a little bit more difficult to restore their environments.
I would bet that is probably something that Oracle, when they were moving to Gen 2, that they decided, hey, let's make this a self-service where people can get one of the backups from the last 60 days if they need it. And so, so anyway, kudos to Oracle for doing that.
Yeah, that's definitely a feature that I think is really good. And again, with the ability to restore those backups going back more than just one day. And for these things, like if it's something that's a little bit out of your wheelhouse and you're not as comfortable with, one, you could open an SR, or you could check Cloud Customer Connect, or even better, you could call us, and that's what we could help you out with, like just some things that maybe they're not not something you do daily, and if it's something that you only do it once a quarter, once a year, that's what we're here for.
Yep.
To help you out with some things that aren't regular tasks for you.
Yeah, or even if you just need to phone a friend. That's some of our clients. We at US Analytics Support, we have some clients where we are their de facto administrator and we provide every area of support and administration for them. And some of our clients are smaller where we're basically phone a friend, call us when you have questions. Again, Oracle, over the years, as I mentioned, I've been working with Oracle for over 20 years, and their documentation has gotten so much better, and it is very easy to find. But that's kind of what we're here for. We provide infrastructure support. If you do happen to be on premise, so you're probably not on this call, if you're on premise, but we also provide technical and functional application support on the EPM Cloud products. So as Melinda mentioned, call us if you have questions. And okay, then our final thought for the just some final thoughts around the migrations. That as a reminder, these waves that are going in, and you may have read this if you were reading through your emails, that your test pod is going to be on the first Friday, and then your migration is going to happen on test on the first Friday, and then on the third Friday of the month will be your prod, going Gen 1 to Gen 2. And so we have those dates. Let's see. Wave 6 is September 1st for test, and then September 15th for prod. I have Wave 7 dates as October 6th test and October 20th for prod, and I don't have Wave 8, but I do know one of our clients is on Wave 8, and so theirs would be happening in a November timeframe. And then the timing, let's see, the timing. So these will happen during your daily maintenance, same time as your Oracle monthly updates go in. But with these migrations, if your database is less than, or your artifact snapshot, if you will, is less than 100 gig, it still may take up to 6 hours. And if you are over 100 gig, it may take up to 12 hours for the OCI migration to happen. And then useful links. I got all of that information through one of the 3 of these URLs. So maybe you have these bookmarked if you're an administrator or a power user of your Oracle EPM Cloud. If not, you probably, once you get this presentation, you can save these URLs down and bookmark these. But again, Oracle has really great information. And that is all. Yep. That is all I have. Are there any other questions, or John or Melinda, anything that you wanted to add?
The only thing I was going to add with regard to the links is what we've covered today. It's really the Cliff Note version, especially with regards to the security configurations, because again, those can be as vanilla as you want it to be, or as complex as you want it to be. And obviously, the more complex you get, the more time it'll take to configure all of that, and to test and to make sure the desired results are what you're getting with the configurations that you set up. The only other thing that I would note is that once that, and I think I may have touched on this before in the regression testing section, but once the migration goes through, the test URLs that you had will go away, and you'll just be using your old URL, and it'll just redirect to that back end that you were testing in. That's all I have. Dawn, Jennifer.
Yeah, there's some questions in the chat. Just on,
okay.
I think one overall, it's a little bit confusing the way Oracle's doing this, but I think at the end it sort of works out. But one thing, like somebody asked, I think they're going live in October, which I think is going to be Wave 7, and they probably did not get like the email what the new URL is, which there's an answer which I think is right. The account admin or identity administrator would get that email, and that's a little bit tricky to read because initially Oracle will send one that they set your OCI pods in Gen 2 up, and here's the link, but that only goes like to 1 or 2 people. So to find that, it's checking in with either IT or the account admin.
Yeah, that could be slightly problematic if the person that's still listed like as I think the owner If you
Mhm.
haven't been like keeping on top of like your security, and either that person has left the company, or it was listed as like maybe whoever installed your environment. If you have a fairly new environment within the last maybe few years, and it was your consultant that did that, and they've just rolled off the project, so they probably wouldn't be getting the emails anymore either. Um, so that would be something to check. Or if it's someone that just it's not their regular job, but maybe they were the project sponsor.
Yeah.
When the application was stood up, and they, the email got buried, because that happens a lot. Like Jennifer said earlier, you may get 20 Oracle emails in a week, and if you're not on top of it, or you have a busy day, the one day that the really important one comes in, it might just get lost.
Yeah, I think there was an answer. You can maybe ask your EPM sales rep, which true. And I think on an SR, you could maybe do a chat to see, before you add an SR, you may be able to find it quick there too. But
I saw
That's
another
true.
question. Let's see.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull my chat up.
Someone was asking, we are having an issue running EPM Automate versus both Gen 1 and Gen 2 from the same machine. Gen 1 is fine, Gen 2 is giving us a certification error. Have you seen this, and do you have a fix?
I have not.
there are some commands that are different in Gen 2. So it
Yeah.
depends on. I think in one of the links we have, I think that EPM Automate has so many command lists that I'm not sure what command would give you a certification error.
Yeah, I would check. Someone just noted just log in. Does the login command work, or is that the
Yeah.
one that's not working?
Well, that was my thought too. You have to log into Gen 1 and then log into Gen 2 separately. So, and the commands are the syntax is a little bit different.
Could it be that the user isn't set up as like their security profile is not native? So when they're trying to do the EPM, when they're trying to use EPM Automate against Gen 2, that they're not in the right group or something?
That could be possible, definitely. If they don't have, depending on what the command, well, the login command should work for service administrator and identity domain administrator. When there are some commands that you need identity domain credentials for, specific to security.
Well, is our mics working?
Yeah.
Yes, I
Okay,
can hear you.
okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was me. So instead of just typing, if I could talk. So
Yeah.
I mean, we've tried everything. We were getting an error that was like it was kind of a false error is what the help desk told us. But the security setup, we saw something in the customer connected made it sound like when Gen 2 shows up for the first integration, the dev test environments, that it'll start working. But that doesn't really help our testing or our waitlisting. So it's just the basic login command. It won't do it, and it's the ID is a new ID that we set up that's not authenticating against anything else.
And you activated the ID and all that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the ID allows you to log in,
Okay.
Outside of EPM Automate.
Yeah, I would personally, I'd have to probably see the configuration and see it live. For things like this, we could definitely, help you separately if you wanted to set something up.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah, because this sounds a little bit more complicated than like a vanilla answer, where there might be configuration. It could be the order of either your IDP policy group or your sign-on policy group. I've seen that cause problems. But again, getting that puzzle piece to fit just right may take a little bit of trial and error, a little bit more testing.
Understood. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's another question. Sorry.
Oh no, there was some comment on the Redwood theme that the experience is highly recommended, which may be part of.
What was the question about Redwood? Let's see, Redwood. Okay, yes. Or was that already answered? The question was, is it true that Redwood experience will become required at some point in Gen 2? Yeah, that is true. I don't remember off the top of my head when how you can do the colors? I'm partial to the colors, and this is a personal preference for me. While the Redwood experience has a few more features than like your, I guess, classic, where you change when you uncheck that Redwood and you just change the colors, that feature is going away. So I wish
I think they talked about that at Kscope, but we didn't get the date. Yeah,
they did. I didn't commit the date to memory because I did remember it, because I was like, oh man, that makes me sad, because for all of my clients, I set their test environments to green, to a light green, so I know as soon as I open it up what environment I'm in. And with Redwood, when you have it enabled, unless you have like a logo that's different for test and prod, you can't tell immediately without looking at your URL what you're connected to. But that's a personal preference for me. But I guess that's the long answer to your question. Yes, it is going away. That will be
a requirement to get Redwood.
Yes.
I have another question. How do you check identity domain administrator?
Like who the person is?
I believe so. How?
In Classic or in Gen 2?
Well, let's start with Classic. I think there was one answer Paul gave. I think it's right. You can ask EPM sales. I think you could do a chat in the Oracle support page if you have that credential.
You can also look in my services under users and check the roles.
Okay, yeah. If you have that, but if somebody doesn't have that, it may not.
But if you're not an administrator and you can't log in, because as an administrator, you can log in and see if someone has that role. You just can't change it. The only way you can change it is if whatever user has the identity domain role.
Service account or account admin.
Yes. Did that answer the question?
I believe so.
So I'm going to go back to this one email. That one email that we had.
Have we answered all of the questions that have come through the chat thus far?
I'm not sure. There's actually another one. I'm not sure if we got to it, but it asked, there is an all domain users group, which was there already on the service page. Do we need to be adding users to this group?
Can you ask that one more time? Where's that? I'm missing that. Let's see.
It says there is an all domain users group, which was there already on the service page. Do we need to be adding users to this group?
I think that depends on if you want.
Hello. What? No, that's a training call. No. What is saying low?
Oh, I think somebody should probably go on mute if they're on the phone. That all domain users group, which was already there.
If you want all of your users to function the same way, then yes, because that's more like that's like a global group.
That almost sounds like an Active Directory group.
I'm not sure.
But I think if I try to dissect it, I think it gets confusing in the new Gen. You have the ability to make different groups for if you have authentication through Microsoft Authenticator or OCI or some other formats, you can add all those. But if everybody right now is an all domain and they use single sign-on already, that may be an adequate enough group. But if you want, two-factor authentication, you may want to set up those groups as, say, Microsoft Authenticator, OCI Authenticator, there's ping IDs. There's a lot more choices to verify who people are today. So I think it was Ashley asking that question. I think if you have one group where you're not going to have, you may be able to convert everybody in that same group. And then you could, if you do decide to use two-factor authentications, maybe for external people, you could add that group after that. I'm thinking through the question right.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, thank you all. I really appreciate the information. On the service page, I'm going to send an image. Yeah, I think if it's going to be used for like signing on, single sign-on, we're kind of forcing everybody the same process, so we don't need separate groups. But it was kind of weird how there was already one established for all domain users. So I was wondering, kind of in the old world, way back when, you had to establish like one group for the users to actually get into the application. Does that still apply? I'm thinking more like the on-prem world. We are currently in the cloud today. So I don't think we need that, but I was really caught off guard with that group.
Well, I think what gets confusing to me is you have a lot more options in it. And I think because, there are a lot more options for sign-on, but I think you'll be okay there. And if you do need to expand, I think it's a lot easier to expand with that. And Melinda, correct me if I'm wrong, because you've set up more groups than I have, but.
Yeah, this was a default one, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So trying to think this through, because the screenshot that you have, it almost looks like how, and the term groups is used in multiple places within the Oracle applications, because you have the groups that you use inside the application that connect to like say your entity security and your
Yes.
Account security and all of that. That almost is that what this is right here? Or
no,
this is in my services, isn't it?
Yeah, this is in my services, and this is like a secondary grouping, like almost like I was kind of thinking after talking to Paul, who's on the line in the chat, I was almost thinking like we have 5 different applications, and in those applications we have users and administrators. So creating a group for all the users and then all the admins. And then I think somebody else's idea of if you have different platforms for different users where you want all your users to do single sign-on, 2-step authentication, but then your admins, maybe they need to have a backup plan and be able to do the username and password. So this seems like it's an add from the old way of doing things, the classic way.
Yeah, because it's the default, which you probably don't want to. I would almost think you don't want to stick with, because you're not going to want every single user to do the exact same thing.
Exactly. Yep. Okay.
So, is there anybody in that group right now, or it's just empty until you import your users from Gen 1?
It's actually empty, and our users are already in. There was never any users in that group, and I tried to delete it, but it won't let me. So that's what makes me think it's a default, and it just has to be there.
Yeah. If it won't let you delete it, then yeah, it's a default.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's a good question and a really good discussion point.
I have another question. Oracle states that you can create a service request to ask Oracle to move your environment out of that wave. We are scheduled for wave 8. Do you know how many future waves are planned?
To be honest, I do not.
And I answered that. I thought Oracle said they wanted everybody to be converted in by December of 23. So I thought their last wave would be wave 9, but I could be wrong.
Okay, I see that you answered now. Thanks,
Yeah.
Don.
No, that's a good question. But because if people don't want to migrate in December, I think you still should be allowed to do the skip update, which would put it into, the next year.
And I believe the only companies that were exempt, well, not really companies, but entities, were government entities, if I remember correctly from reading that. They weren't on the same schedule as the corporations. And that, I don't remember where I read that. It was within Oracle documentation at some point. But I would say specifically to get a 100% verified answer for that, I would definitely reach out to Oracle. And if you're needing to extend for some reason, work with them on the extension and not wait to get swept up, even when they send out the test pods. I would do it as soon as possible.
Mhm. Okay. Those are all of the questions that I see in the chat. Please let me know if I missed anything, and feel free to ask questions now if anyone has any.
Oops, I think a couple more just came in, Catherine, but I think you send the recording out to everyone.
Yes,
Okay.
I'll be sending this out. I do have to edit it a little bit before it's sent out, but it should be out by the end of the week.
So here's one on.
Okay, here's one. Does Oracle create applications in Oracle Cloud Services of IDCS in new OCI environment? For example, there are many services like Auto Analytics, SBase, Marketplace, SSO, ?
Okay, it looks like you'll still.
That I'm not sure about.
I think so. Are
I
you talking about the one that came in at 12:57?
Mhm.
I think those things are what end up that you can connect them by you in the my applications setup. Because there's a whole list, and I didn't, when I did that when I was working with my one client where we did that for just EPM, we were so focused on EPM, we didn't go through the whole list of applications that were available to add to that integration, and it wasn't specific to their business. So it's possible, or if you have, are those all if they're web-based, if there's a URL, I would say you would be able to connect that URL into my applications and have it all in one page. But
Mhm.
that's not with 100% certainty. But it's absolutely worth testing out. I personally just haven't done it.
Okay. Another question is, how far ahead does Oracle typically send the test pod URLs?
Yeah, I was just typing in. I looked at a couple of the ones we've had. It's I think about 3 months before.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if
think
that's
so,
a rule though.
2 to
Yeah.
3 months.
And it is pretty, after it's done, I do think the setup and identity management and all that is a little bit new, but after it goes pretty, it is confusing. I mean, after it's done but if you're doing it yourself, updating your test pod, and setting up your users, and that can be a little bit clunky, right?
Yeah, so wave 5, we were supposed to have June and July to test, and we didn't get our new links until mid-June. So we had like a month and a half. So don't be alarmed if you do get them later than anticipated. That's more than enough time to get through, for the most part, depending on what you have, to get through all the testing. But yeah, we only got a month and a half.
Wow. Okay.
So
All
I
right,
think
well, that's it. Thanks, Catherine. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really
you.
appreciate it. Thought this was a great hour of information and question Q&A time was great. Catherine, I'll let you close out the call and give anybody last minutes.
Well, thank you, Jennifer and Melinda, for all the helpful information. I see one more question. Wait, we're nervous because they haven't sent ours yet. We did a skip update, which means we are pushed to wave 7. So anyway, we'll contact Oracle. Thanks. Okay, never mind. Wasn't a question. Okay, does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to use the mic if you do want to ask. I'll give it a minute and then we'll probably close out. Okay. Okay, I think we're ready to end this call. Thank you all so much for joining. We really appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a great
guys.
day.
Bye.
Bye.